Hello, Daniel here again with Recovery Central. I'd like to start by reading a couple of verses from the New Testament. This first one in chapter 3 of John's Gospel in verse 21. But he that doeth the truth comes into the light, that his deeds might be made manifest, that they are wrought by God. And then in 1 John chapter 1 verse 7, but if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. One of my most memorable conversations in the last probably 2 or 3 years now was a conversation with a person who described a situation where people in places of power in a given location were abusing that power. There was some corruption, and the description offered no reason to believe that anything could be done to stop those abuses of power. Now, while this was not a description of anything here in Washington, Indiana, not any names that I would recognize, or I don't think I even heard any names, but it stuck in my mind, and it became somewhat disturbing to me because there was this description of no way to stop the abuses of power. And because it was understood as something that honest people could do nothing about, it led to or suggested the idea of why even try to do the right thing? Why even try to do the right thing? Now, I would invite you to think with me. Whether or not we know of any abuses of power going on in our own lives, or we should realize that anything that threatens hope is a serious threat to humanity. If the threat is to our sense of hope, that threat is a very great threat. And it may all boil down to attitudes and fears. At the same time, we should be reminded that we can do something, because anytime we encourage each other, we say things to help alleviate the fears that might be, and encourage teamwork, and encourage each other in the process of working together for the right thing, we are making a change. We're doing something about the underlying problem of fears and attitudes that can be a very grave threat. And so at Recovery Central, the hopes that we share with each other do matter a great deal. As I myself have shared personally, I do consider myself to be a person in long-term recovery, which for me began back in April on the 8th of 1991. That was the last time that I was engaged in a toxic relationship. And so this is what I consider to be my recovery. And so I say that to say that I have come to really endorse and embrace the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, a sense of accountability in terms of boundaries and anything else that might destroy relationships or create unhealthy relationships for me. So I have come to value honesty and humility with others in recovery, as well as other vital qualities of authenticity, vulnerability, and other things that we share in the recovery community. Among my favorites in the recovery literature are a few of the less familiar lines in Reinhold Niebuhr's famous Serenity Prayer. These are lines that you don't hear very often, but they are: living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking this sinful world as Jesus did, as it is, and not as I would have it. And if we keep words like these always in our hearts, we can begin to understand a spiritual pathway, even beyond addiction recovery. A spiritual pathway for any of us, which is a pathway of honesty, humility, openness, and surrender. As I consider all this today, I'm reminded of a profound disconnection between much of the church life and the recovery community. I say this not to condemn church life or suggest we start converting church buildings into rehab centers or homeless shelters. I would actually prefer more dialogue to discuss the real meaning of our salvation and other faith matters. And I can see room in church life for people to grow in trust with each other and share in our faith journey together. To me, the essential practice, as I read in the scriptures, is this practice of walking in the light. Something I envision as a kind of dialogue around a special table. Now, this table is not identical to a 12-step meeting table. I believe it does go beyond that. It is a table where we seek God's kingdom first. It's a table where all agendas are fair game. I guess I would give it a glass top to reveal anything that might otherwise hide underneath the table. The table is a place for accountability, but also a place for growth, a place for deeper understanding with others in faith who can share their strength and discover real solutions together in the community in the light of Christ as Christ has called us to live. Now, for many, a table like this can seem uninviting, and it can seem uninviting for various reasons. If I'm convinced there are only a few certain people in the world who need accountability, I would tend to avoid this table where all are treated as equals. This table is not a place where some people are to be elevated above others as officers or chiefs above the common people. All share equality at this table. And some will scoff at the honesty which allows people into each other's business. A fear of confrontation will also keep people from joining the discussion. Others may simply be too distracted by the world or unwilling to surrender to a greater purpose with those who share around this table. And I've had my own natural tendencies of refusal. I can bring anxieties or fears. I might think the table is a place where it should be all about me, or I can put myself in a kind of limelight, or I might be resistant to this real business of surrender of all that I have to God. I will also find at this table instigators, people who can shoot anything down with little capacity for group cohesion. There might be some busybodies or gossips or other hypocrites who do not take this table seriously. Some will react too quickly and derail the dialogue and drive divisions around this table. Others will engage in mind reading or other defenses. There are many ways to sabotage the fellowship around this table, and yet we have all the more reasons to stay with it. Suppose a controversial issue comes up in this discussion. We might be discussing scripture, raising difficult questions, increasing the potential for conflict, and then a facilitator might be suspected, as if he or she had planned the discussion around preconceived notions, personal preferences. Distrust can shut the dialogue down. People can retreat to their preferred media or charismatic sources of answers, or be drawn away to other interests apart from this table, this fellowship. Some will say that we have to address the elephant in the room. It might be that in reality we really need to give the elephant an enema and get right down to it and not ignore the elephant for 1 second. And some will speak ad nauseum about the problems in this world which we can do nothing about until Jesus returns, as if to dismiss the possibility of this dialogue, as if Christ is not relevant to things that matter today. Do we believe God is alive today and fulfilling a purpose today in people of faith? And so, how might participation at this table succeed? If we practice accountability and build trust, will we be able to reach conclusions together and make a real difference in this world? Can we make decisions together under the legitimate authority of Christ? Or do we even believe we can have a real connection to divine authority? So how do we bring legitimate authority into our dialogue? For now, I am simply insisting that this table is a real place, not merely a figment of the imagination. At the same time, I would say imagination is critical. If we cannot imagine this table, we can hardly experience it. So this table is a real opportunity for those who can see it, a place where people come by invitation and not incarceration, intimidation, infatuation, or any other gimmick. The table is a place where people can meet God if they search for God with all their hearts. It's a place of respect and confidentiality, a place where self-interests end and real community interests begin. Well, I say table. Others might bring in different terms. Someone might throw out my table and replace it with a river or a song or other metaphor. And so the bottom line is really not so much what we call it, but that we know we have a real invitation to God's light. Light which is often dismissed in favor of the world's knowledge. But in God's light, our fellowship has a profound authority to forgive. In God's light, we can find real healing from resentments, from anything else. We can find real peace as God alone can bring peace to our lives. And so God's light is not about fantasies of the hereafter or reward for those who have been most righteous. God's light is really for people of faith who can know God is up to something today, that God can make real changes in this world, and that God is in the business of doing it through people of faith, ordinary people, people like us. Can we believe that God does mighty works through people of faith? Can we know how far God might take our efforts, God's power, God's wisdom in bringing changes to our present world? And why should we not seek God with a full confidence of God being found by those who seek God with all our hearts? And God is in the business of change, always doing it through people. People who are simply called to walk in God's light and live according to God's wisdom, God's power, and God's love. And may God bless all of you.